application. So we saw the basic architecture of Angular application, from where it starts, actually what files it comprises of, and everything, right? Next, after understanding this, now today we will start working with step by step, one by one, all the options in Angular, right? We will start designing the components here. Actually, so we need to understand first the building blocks of Angular application. So yesterday we saw that our application starts from an index page. We have index.html. Application starts with index page, index.html, and our application in the index page is defined with one component, and the key component that is already available is app component, and one more important file, app module. This is the location where everything is registered. So all the components that you define, imports, modules that you define, providers, that is services you define. So declaration contains registration of components, and import comprises of right, yeah. So what red line you want? What red line you are watching, Kundan Kumar? It is just a icon, right? It is just a icon to tell that it defines some mandatory rules for TypeScript. Do you want to know why flower braces also there? You know why flower braces also there? That means it contains a set of rules. Okay, that is just a icon, right? You don't need to worry about how the icon. In every IDE, the same icon will not be there, because we have Visual Studio icons installed. That's the reason. We will get different types of icons for different types of files. In every editor, you will not get the same, right? Yeah. So now here, how we can deal with that red color. If there is in code, you need to confuse, right? In the icon, there is red color, green color, blue color. You don't need to worry about that. That is just an icon, right? Yeah. So here, the point we need to start with now in Angular is we are going to deal with components in Angular. So we are going to discuss with the components. So we are starting with Angular components. How do we define the components and how do we deal with the components? All right. So technically, so what are components and how do we work with the components? We will see. As I already showed you an overview architecture, components are building blocks for Angular application. Components are building blocks for Angular application. So a component, usually, actually a component provides UI for interacting. So it provides UI and logic for interacting with application. It provides UI and logic for interacting with application. A component a component comprises of styles which can make presentation presentation interactive 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 and responsive. So technically, Angular application is built with components. It provides the UI and logic for interacting with application. Component usually comprises of styles. It also contains styles that makes the presentation more interactive and responsive. Actually, Angular provides provides a component library called called Angular material. It provides a component library called Angular material. So actually what you can do is you can add the component library and import predefined components and use in your application. That means Angular provides a ready-made components. Suppose I want a calendar. A ready-made component is present. I want a navigation bar. A ready-made component is present. I want some tabs panel, a dialog box. Ready-made components are there. So we are calling them predefined components. We can use those predefined components. Or Angular allows to create custom components. That means according to your requirements, you can create your own components. So you have ready-made components that you will see later while working with Angular materials, right? And it contains custom components, so we can create our own components. When you are learning Angular, obviously you will learn what is there in Angular, right? So I will cover cleanly everything, okay? So here the point is using predefined components and implementing them in our project. So requires good knowledge of working with components first. So in order to use predefined components, we need to first know about how components work. So that means first we need to design our own components. We have to design our own components, and then we can use those components. Once we are perfect with creating and understanding components, we can manage the components which are ready-made designed for us. Because to work with ready-made templates and components, you need to master the knowledge of components, because where the code is written, what functionality is configured, how to make changes according to our requirements, those all depends on the good knowledge of your components, right? Yeah. So now what we are going to learn in Angular first is how we can create the components, how we can configure the components. So that means we are learning how do we configure the custom components. So custom components. That means we can create our own components and we can use our own components. Actually, so every component every component in Angular comprises of presentation, so logic and styles. It comprises of presentation, logic, and styles. Presentation is defined with HTML. Presentation is defined with HTML. So logic is configured using TypeScript. So which is transcompiled into JavaScript, and styles are defined. You can define the styles inline, embed, or CSS. You can define the styles inline, embed, or CSS. Generally, if you know styles can be used in three ways: inline, embedded, and CSS. So you can write the styles inline, you can write the styles embedded, and you can write the styles CSS. There can be any technique used for them. We will see in our examples how to handle them. So technically, a component comprises of three things: the presentation, the logic, and the styles. And the presentation is with HTML, logic is with TypeScript, and effects styles are inline styles or embedded styles or CSS. Right. Here, first point is actually there are various techniques for designing a component. Before that, one more point I have to tell. Actually, the component related all properties and methods. The component related all properties and methods are derived from component. They are derived from component base class. They are derived from component base. They are derived from component base of. So the library is Angular/core. That means in order to create a component, we need some properties and methods. All the properties and methods are derived from component base class. This component base class is present in Angular core library. It is present in that Angular core library. And technically, important is component is a TypeScript. Component is a TypeScript file. That means usually it have .ts file. So component is technically a TypeScript file. So actually you can say that technically component is configured in script file, and its presentation is defined in .html file. It's a presentation. Its presentation is defined in .html file. Its effects, its styles, you can say its styles are defined in .css. So .css, or you can also define inline You can also define inline and embed. What is that inline and embed? Generally, people in CSS knows. Here also in different occasions, I will show you. That means typically every component comprises of three things: a TypeScript, a HTML, and a CSS. Actually, there are different techniques of designing component. There are different techniques of designing component. So various techniques of designing components. What are those techniques? That means you can design a component by using following techniques. One is you can design component by using inline documentation technique, and you can design by using code behind documentation technique. So what are these two techniques actually? Generally, we will see both techniques, how we can use. So that means how we can configure. That means inline documentation technique. Inline documentation technique. Actually, inline documentation technique is nothing but in this. So actually, in this technique, the presentation, logic, and the styles all are maintained in a single file. That's important. In inline documentation technique, presentation, logic, and styles are maintained in a file. That means component is configured in only one file. So that is the .ts file. It will not have HTML file, CSS files. Everything is configured in one file. Actually, this type of that means inline, usually inline technique is good if your component is having a simple functionality. It is having a simple functionality, and very important is it is having a simple functionality. So it is good. So if regular extensions are not required, that means you don't need to change regularly. So these type of components are mostly used when we want a simple functionality, and regular changes are not required inside it. Regular extensions are not required. We will design and we configure it, and extensions are not required. So why? Because the problem with one file is these are hard. The main problem is these are hard to test. They are hard to test. Another problem with them is cannot be extended easily. That means not extendable. That means easy extensions are not supported. So that is the problem with this kind of technique. Right. So whenever this kind of things we need regularly, because many times we want components in such a way that we don't want any regular extensions in them. So, and we don't want much testing to happen regularly on that. That means they will not be in a loosely coupled nature. hard to test, but they are good. So that means actually what happens is, in which way they are good, because if if you configured everything in one file, then it will reduce the number of requests, and improve the page load time. That is good. If you configured everything in one file, it will reduce the number of requests. And it will improve the page load time, because generally if you are maintaining separate files, then number of requests will increase, and everybody knows that if number of requests are increasing in any web environment, obviously the page load time also increases. So that is the problem with general approach. So that is the problem with inline, but it is good for certain occasions. So those I told you, right? So we will see both techniques, how we can handle that. Let's see how we can configure a component, how we can define a component. By using inline technique, how to design a component, we will see that, how we design a component using inline technique. So let's go to the project. There are so many methods. I will show you all one by one, different ways, right? First, we will manually do everything. So what we need to do is, as we discussed, so here, all in inline technique, component, presentation, logic, styles, all are maintained in a single file. And it is configured in a TypeScript file. So we need to go to app folder. Here we need to go to app folder. And in this folder, we are adding a new file. And I will give the name as home.component.ts, a TypeScript file. So it is not mandatory that it should have extension .component, but it is a general tradition that components are given with component suffix. It's not extension actually. Extension is TypeScript only. So it is a tradition that for components we give .component, for services we give .service, for modules we give .module. That is a general tradition to follow. So I am configuring this home component.ts. Okay, so now hit enter. So we are adding a new file into that app folder. Now, technically, component is a class. I am creating a class, and home component, that is the name of that class. That is generally a class. Technically, component is a class. Means it's a holder. It contains all the contents here. Yeah. And general basic thing, we know that in modular system, because you are maintaining in a separate file, so this class is not accessible outside this file. So we need to mark it as export. That we already know. So the component name is a home component, and the component it is configured as export so that we can access outside. Now still, this is an ordinary TypeScript file. Angular doesn't consider this as a component because it's just .ts file, ordinary file. So nowhere the behavior of component is given to this. So you just have a component without any component behavior actually. That means it's an ordinary TypeScript file. So it's not having the behavior of component now. So what we do here now is to give the behavior of component and configure as a component. So we need this component base. This is the component base. Component related all properties and methods are derived from component base that of Angular core library. So that means, and here the point, technically component is configured as a TypeScript file, is configured as a TypeScript file. And important is the component behavior comes from the component base, the component behavior comes from the component base. How the behavior is defined? So that means I need to make this as a component. Then at the top here, I need to import, and we need to import. You know how to import from Angular /@Angular/core. From Angular core, we need to import component. So component, we have to import this component. It is the component base. Okay, so you imported that, but so the Angular framework is not considering this as a component yet. You don't have a component configuration yet. That means now we have to tell the Angular compiler and the Angular framework first. We need to tell the Angular framework that this class is a component. This class is a component. That means the configuration of component is defined by using component metadata. So that means the component behavior is given by using component metadata. Component metadata is defined by using component metadata. So generally, component metadata is defined in this way: @component. So @component. So that means you are accessing a property. Of that component. By using @, you can access any property. @ refers to dynamic code. So that means here we are adding a dynamic component code. And metadata contains collection of some properties and values which are defined. Properties and values means, they are defined in an object way. So component metadata is defined in this way. So we have a property and colon, and we have value. And you know that multiple properties, comma, that means we need to define a property and colon and value. That means the component behavior is given by using component metadata. And component metadata is configured by using @component. That means now this is not having a component behavior. Now after importing, we have to use @component. That means actually this @component is an aliasing. That means there is we generally call as, it is a component. It is called as a decorator. Component decorator. This component decorator decorates this class as a component. It is called decorator. So that means this decorator will decorate this class as a component. Components are decorated with component decorator. Modules are decorated with ng module, Angular module, ng module. Services are decorated with input provider like options. So that means different decorators are required. Decorators are required. That means the behavior of component is given by using a component decorator. And a decorator can be accessed by using @net, the decorator name, and it contains metadata. So component metadata, that means it contains the metadata. That means you can see this is a decorator. And as I already told you, so this is decorator, and a decorator that marks a class as an Angular component and provides the configuration metadata that determines how the component should be processed, instantiated, and used at the runtime. So this is very important. So that means the behavior of component is given from here. So that means here, so you have to make one simple note, and the note I copy from this tip it has given to us. So that means what is a decorator and what is the concept of a decorator. So component decorator, that means this is @net component. So it is a decorator that marks a class as an Angular component and provides configuration metadata that determines how the component should be processed, instantiated, and used in runtime. What actual metadata comprises of? That means what metadata comprises of. Technically, you should know what metadata comprises of. Usually, so I will configure here. So that means what metadata actually comprises of. Technically, metadata usually comprises of metadata. Generally, metadata comprises of information, which includes so from what the markup used for presentation, what styles are used for markup. So that means what animations are defined for markup, etc. All such information is defined in metadata. So component metadata comprises of information which includes what the markup used for presentation, what the styles used for markup, what animations are defined for markup, such things. All such information is configured by using metadata. So what are the options here? How do we configure the options? Let's see how we define the metadata. So that means here component contains now metadata. The component decorator contains metadata. In this metadata, first point is we given a component decorator. Then immediately an error comes here. You can see it says that you marked this now as a component. Then according to component, some properties are mandatory. Please implement them. That is what the warning error it is showing. That means your component is not yet ready. So you decorated it as a component so that Angular will treat it as a component. Okay. Then we have to define metadata. In the metadata, what are the important options? First option is what HTML it has to render. What HTML this component has to render. So what HTML it has to render. So, and how this component is accessible. So that means you want to access this component. So you need to access this component in index page. Then how to access this component? So every component needs, so now what are the properties I am explaining here? So here, let's create one table. What are generally required? So I'm inserting a table here. Actually, so what options are required? See, that means this is metadata property and purpose. What is the purpose of that? Okay. Here, first point is in the metadata property, you have a selector. In the metadata property, we have a selector. Actually, selector specifies a name used for accessing the component in any another component or from index page or from index.html page. That means if you want to access this component and use in index page or in any another component, you need a selector. And remember, important is generally, so that is another important point is selector is defined as element. Selector is defined as element. Actually, technically, selector is defined as a directive which is used as element. Selector is defined as a directive which is used as element. It is defined as a directive which is used as element. That means component actually comes under the category of directive. It is a directive. A component directive contains a selector. Selector indicates how you can access it, how you can access this. That means selector is defined as a directive, usually directive which is used as element. That means example. So you have to define like this, like a element app-home. That is how we define the selector. And we use this app-home to access this component. That means every component requires a selector. By using the selector, we can access this component and use it in any location. So to access the component and use in any location, so it requires a selector. So let's keep a selector for our component. So selector. And selector, so is a property, and the value for the selector here, always use single quotes, because according to TS-lint means analyzer, so the default rule is single quote here. And in the single quote, double quotes you can use for inner strings, you know already that. So I'm using selector name as you have to write like a tag app. So here generally we use like an app hyphen. We write like this app hyphen home. We write like this, but we don't access it like this. We access in this way. That means directive is used as an element in order to access this component and use in any location. We have to access like a tag, you need to configure like a tag, right? So we are defining, we need to configure. You will learn why you are in a hurry, right? So many topics are there. Just go with my flow. That's it, right? You will learn every concept and you will come to know about all of them, right? So lot of doubts will come, right? Just follow my process. You will be get clarified with all of them. No need to worry about that. Okay, right? So because so many complications are there here, lot of techniques are there. Until or unless I finish explaining all the methods, so you will have several doubts so related to this. So that's the reason, no need to worry. Once I say that now you finish it with component, then till still you have any doubts, then we can discuss about that, right? Because step by step, level by level, we will learn all of them, and everything we will discuss. How to create a component in another component, how to access data of the component, so much is there, right? You are just in the first level of designing. So let's give this. The component is ready. Okay, selector is ready. Okay, next point. Here, so what markup it has to render? There are two techniques actually. Another technique here, another option is we have template. We have template. So we have template. Actually, we have a template and we have a template URL. Two options are there. Template and we have template URL. Two options are there. So what is template? What is template URL? Template specifies the markup to be rendered. Markup to be rendered. It specifies the markup to be rendered. What markup you have to render when this component is requested. Specifies the markup to be rendered when component is requested. That means the presentation. What presentation it should show, the markup to be rendered. So you have to define in template. So very important is, if your markup is in separate file, that means it actually template specifies directly the markup to be rendered. That means it specifies directly the markup to be rendered. What you want to render, directly write that markup here. That means you can write the markup directly here. So means what we can do is, here I can use template. And currently template is used in inline technique. Template is mostly used in inline technique. In inline technique, we use template. So that means the presentation, the markup, that styles and logic, everything in one file. Then we want markup also here only. Then we use template. And usually template contains markup, means lot of HTML code. Then better to put a backtick so that we can add lot of expressions here. That means I will keep a heading and close the heading. And here I defined some option, some Amazon home, something like this. Amazon home, just what the project we have here, right? Okay. And you design, you press enter, because backtick allows you to design in multiple lines. You can cleanly design as you want. You put the markup here. So that is presentation here, paragraph. I'm adding a paragraph. And in the paragraph, I am configuring some like this is our first component, right? So that is just a basic option, right? Amazon home, right? Something like this. So here I can add so much, whatever I want, I can add. Here one technique is, suppose in this class we have a property. So public In this class, we have a property public and the property name. So what the property, I'm configuring the property name. So public some message, is equal to, I'm adding some message. Remember here, no need to define the types because they are implicitly typed. You can see this message is a string type according to what data type you define. So this is also according to the rules of TypeScript. Remember, it's not mandatory that everyone should follow the same rules. By default, it is there. You can change that. Where to change that? I told you TSLint. In the TSLint, we can change that. I will show you some later configurations how to change. Initially, I'm just adding some message. Suppose I defined some like some second. So 2nd August 2022. So here I defined some 4 August 2020. So here I added some special something like monsoon sale like this. So some 70% off like this. So this is just a message, and this message will be keep changing regularly. In that case, we will not type such messages here directly. Dynamic, which can be changing regularly. And if I update here, it should update there also. Then what we do is we can bind such dynamic data to our template. So what I will do here, so here I am creating a simple div. And in this div, I want to display this message. Then any dynamic data you can access and present in your template by using a data binding expression of Angular. So that is flower brace, 2 flower braces. This is a data binding expression. It binds this data, any dynamic data, into this location. That means from where you want to get the value. I want to get the value from MSG. It will get that and show. That means some data need to be changed regularly. In that case, we can keep that and configure that through a data binding expression here. Now we can declare some property, we can access that, and we can keep that here. So that means now here in this div, there will be no standard data. It will be keep on changing from the data is coming from this message actually. Okay. So this is general template. Actually, if you are using code behind technique, our presentation will be in a separate file, means HTML in separate file. Then template URL, it specifies the file that contains markup. So you can link an HTML file. So for component, link an HTML file for component. That means it will bring the presentation from this file and it will use for this component. So this is not required now because we are using inline technique. Inline technique means we will write inside here only. That is, so we have a selector and we have a template and we have a template URL. We are configuring it. Okay, fine. Next point is we have, so after configuring the template, we have styles. And styles URLs. Same, style URLs. So we have styles. So we can define the styles here. So important is what is styles? Actually, styles, it is a collection of style properties and their values. Style properties and values. It is a collection of style properties and values. Usually, collection is nothing but it is an array type. Usually collection means it is an array type here. So, and we have another option, style URLs. Style URLs. You can have styles. You can configure styles. You can also use style URLs. You can also use style URLs. You can also use style URLs. Style URLs intention is nothing but it can access styles. It can access styles from an external style sheet. External style sheet. So that means it can access styles from an external style sheets. Right. So now, what is your question, Mr.? Why I am using a comma na? Ankit Gupta, have you seen this is an object and these are properties in object? You reset your TypeScript knowledge. You came with a fresh brain for Angular. Right, that is an object and its properties. Yeah. Right. So here this is an object. Clearly it is an object, and object related properties and values, they need to be separated with commas, right? Yeah. Styles URLs, that means if you want styles regularly, you want the styles regularly coming from separate style sheet, then you have to use styles URLs. So currently we can directly define styles. In our inline technique, we are using styles. We are using styles here. We are using styles. So styles. And styles is an array. That means you have to configure like an array. So generally, if you have any confusion about any property, how to use it, is it array, is it string, is it number? If you have any confusion, you can just right click on that property and go to definition, and it will take you to the definition. In the definition, you can see string array. So that means it is good, easy to understand. Okay, this is how you have to use it now. It's properties, right? So now it is a string array. That means you need to pass in an array style here. So we need multiple properties to be configured. So that means how you define the styles. Every style is defined. So here I am using a single quote. And here I am writing array element. Suppose heading 2. For a heading 2, so you know how to write styles now. This is heading 2 selector. That means type selector. And for heading 2, what styles you want? So for heading 2, I want text align. I want as center. That means we give center. Okay. Multiple styles. That means I want another style to define here. Remember, this is not JavaScript object. This is a styles properties. And you know that in styles, every property is separated with a semicolon. Am I right? Every property is separated with semicolon. If it is styles, this is not JavaScript object. This is styles selector. In style selector, every property will have a semicolon. Okay, next option. Here we have color. Color, I will define some color as some dark cyan. Okay, some color. You can use color codes or color options, and this is for heading. That is the point for heading. For heading, I given that. Okay, there is a div here. So we need to configure for the div. Actually, when you are configuring these elements inside them, so you can directly access them by the tag names, type selector, but every div it will apply. You know that you can have an ID. You can have an ID. So ID is, suppose I'm giving ID as some offer. Offer is an ID. Then what I will do here is for this offer ID, this is the offer ID. Then I'm just configuring. So here we need to use, this is heading is finished. I want one more set of styles. That means again, comma, this is an array. Another set of styles. All the set of styles are defined with a string representation. It's a string array. And this time, you know that ID selectors are accessed by using hash. That means I am using hash. I say offer. I access offer. For offer ID, what are the effects you want to apply? So what are the effects you want to apply? Suppose I'm saying border as 2 pixel, so solid. So 2 pixel solid, and I said some dark cyan, okay, dark cyan, okay, and that is one style. And another option I am defining as, so border radius I defined as 20 pixel, so 20 pixel, and I'm adding another option, box shadow, and I'm giving some 2 pixel, 3 pixel, 4 pixel, and dark cyan, okay. This is the effect I have given for this, and you can add so many options. This is for offer. Width, height, anything you want, you can configure for that. And like that, you can put for paragraphs or any number of options we have configured. So this is the styles we have defined. So our component is ready. Our component is having some logic. Our component is having some presentation and some styles. So inline, these are enough actually. Later you will learn all other properties, what other properties are available. Actually, in this component related metadata, you have animations. Animations is are nothing but, so it defines a set of CSS keyframes to use for animations. CSS have a keyframes concept, right, for animation. So a lot of other options also there. Those you will see in animations concept, how we can keep the animations and configure them. Initially, we don't need all of them. We need a selector, we need a template, and we need styles. So you created a component. But this component is not ready. Means you cannot use this component. So already I told you, after creating the component, that means in the example now, what we are doing is, so in the example, first point is go to, so we have to go to app folder and add a new file by name. So we are adding a new file here. And what is that new file we are configuring here? So that is the new file. Its name is home.component.ts. In this home component.ts, so in that home component.ts, we are adding some logic there. So we are adding some logic here. That means I will copy this logic. Yeah, that's it. So all this is presented here. So that is the logic we are adding there. That is the logic. That means home component is having all this logic. So let's move this so to a new page. Okay. So this is the logic we have defined, all the logic we have configured here. Okay. Now important is, this is all the concept. This is all what we defined there. Okay. Now this component is not ready. That means you added everything, but it is not ready. Why? Because already I told you a component can be used only after registering the component. You have to register this component. So where to register the component? That means let's go. Components are registered in app module. You have to go to app module. Here components are registered in declarations. In declarations, currently we don't have our component. Our component is home component. So first you have to import our component. From. So dot indicates the same folder in that home component, right? You know this importing hierarchy already we learned. From here, we have to import. Home component. And after importing, we have to register the component in declarations. In declarations already app component. Remember, every component you want to use, it should be defined here. Don't delete existing and use this, because other components are deleted. Their dependencies will be missing and they will throw you errors. So home component is added here. Now your component is ready to use. Your component is ready to use. So what we need to do here now, we need to go to app.module.ts, and there we need to do some works here. Register your component and set in bootstrap, because you want to start with this component. That means go to bootstrapping. Currently bootstrapping is from app component. I will change this to home component. That means I want to access from the home component. Later we can create one screen from where user can choose which component he wants. For that we need to learn a concept called routing. As of now, every day which component we are designing, we will access that component and use it. So every time we need to change this bootstrap. Later you will not get this problem, because after you learn routing, you can create one home page from where you can navigate to other pages, right? So here you need to bootstrap this. Okay, this is done. That means I need to do this work in this. So what we have to do, we have to import in this app module.ts. So we need to import. So I will paste that here. So we need to import this. After importing, so we need to define in ng module declarations. This is our first example. That's the reason I'm giving all the code. Okay. So that means later I will give only the changes we need to do. And here we need to import this home component and we need to keep it in the startup. I will highlight those two things what we have done. That means these are the changes we have to do there. These are the changes we need to do there. Now still your component is not ready, because after defining to mention this home component to start, you know that. So our application starts with index page. So go to the index page. In index page, some root component is present. Here we have to keep our component. And what is our component? Index page should start with app-home. That is the component. So that is the selector name. You have to give the selector name. That means next step, what you have to do now is go to so index.html, and here in the body section we need to just call the selector here. That is app home. We need to call the selector here, app home. So everything is ready. Now you can start your application. That means start your project. And you know how do we start the project? So ng serve -- project is equal to Amazon. Our project is Amazon, right? So that is the option we have defined, -- Amazon. That's done. Okay, now let's run this project and see whether our component home component is coming here. Means we will see ng serve -- project. For serve shortcut is yes. You can directly use yes, or you can write complete serve. Project is equal to Amazon. That is the project name. Okay. Now once the project is listening on that port number on that particular IP address, then we can try from the URL and see. So yeah. So once it builds the solution, then you can keep that running and you can make changes to your solution. Those changes will be updated here. updated here. Everything should match correctly. That means which component you defined in this bootstrap, so right, in the bootstrap app module, in the bootstrap, the same component should be inside this index. So you have to configure that, right? It will build everything in your project. You are compiling the project now. You don't need to compile individually your TS files. Nah? Your project is compiled means it is compiling every file of your project, right? Right. And finally, it says, so it is now listening. So that means Angular development server is listening on this port number. So let's access that. That means we will open here. So in a browser, so http:// localhost 4200 and hit enter. Then it has to get our component and display here, right? And this Amazon, some text is color. I will, you want to make changes, go to the component, and here you can see the color. I will keep this heading color. I will keep this as white because background is, now save the changes here. You save the changes here. The changes will be updated. Save the changes here. The changes are updated automatically. And in the live server, it will reflect that. In the live server, it will reflect it. It will keep the changes. It will modify. And the important is if you are doing any changes in the styles and effects and everything. For example, I go here in the styles, wherever this offer div is there, For that offer div, I'm adding some option like padding. I'm defining padding as 10 pixels. And I save the changes. It will recompile this again. And this time you can see the changes are updated and shown to you. Right? That is the basic approach of how we can configure and define this application, right? So you can configure. So everything here, yeah, meta and link already will come because that is already configured with a template, right? In index.html, meta is already there. And a link is for a favorite icon. You know, websites will have favorite icons. You will have a HTML. Why this base href will come? All these you will learn, right? Right. First, you know about this point. That is enough, right? You will learn so many things. So how to deal with it, I will take care about that. You don't need to suggest for that. Okay. Right. So because we know the best way, I will tell you how to deal with that. Right. So we will deal with that step by step. So no need to worry about those points. Okay. All right. So because we will see how to handle according to the situation. So you don't need to suggest me that in this way, in that way, right? I know the better way than you. Then I will let you know about it. Okay. When situation comes, we will explore everything. Okay. Right. So this is enough for understanding how do we design this. Now you can try this, then we can continue with the rest of the options tomorrow. Okay, right.